Senior High Audition Etudes, set number 1. As a friendly reminder, as the auditionee, please remember the first thing you should do when you walk in the room, besides bringing in your implements and music as such, is to set up the drums so they're comfortable for you. I find that students are always timid about doing so, and as a result, they have to move their body a lot to accommodate proper sounds. So please adjust the instruments to you so you know exactly where your playing areas are without having to physically look at the drums. We're going to be discussing 2 things with regards to this etude. First is the forte piano roll, and the second is we're going to talk about sticking and ways to incorporate some technical ideas for measures 12 and 13. First, forte piano roll and crescendo. You see this in measure 5. The tendency on this for students, I find the majority of the time, is that a student will really overplay the first note of the forte piano roll. And it's just simply a forte note, and then we begin the roll at piano. So forte note, and piano, and then crescendo. That's all it is. So please ensure that you are not overplaying the forte note and the forte piano roll. So 1 hit at a forte, and then we'll leave the stick down, and then begin the roll, and then crescendo. Next is measures 12 and 13. There are a variety of things to consider and a variety of approaches. For me, the one thing I want to offer to you, you can take it or leave it, the thing that's different about playing timpani as opposed to snare drum in a passage like measures 12 and 13, we have accented and unaccented notes, is that when playing timpani, the unaccented notes need to be much louder or they need to be fuller. So if I play this passage, measure 12 and 13, I'll play just measure 12 right now. Like in snare drum passage, you're really only going to hear the emphasized or accented notes. If I bring all of the unaccented notes up a little bit and simply change the speed of the stroke for the accents, you should be able to hear the integrity of all 12 notes. Experiment with it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, great. Find whatever works for you. For me, that's my concept as far as the sound palette for the accented versus unaccented notes. Lastly, our sticking suggestions for measure 12 and 13. The first 3 beats of measure 12, I will play natural sticking, alternating. So that means I will have to cross on the 6th, 8th note. And when crossing, the thing I want to try to remember is that I'm going to be crossing at the wrists. So, and ensuring that I get a full stroke from both hands. The next thing is that the last 3 8th notes of measure 12, this is the 10th, 11th, and 12th, 8th note, I will be doing left, right, right. So that bar slowly is this. Next will be a left-hand lead. The only passage I'm going to change is on the 3rd primary beat, the 3rd dotted quarter beat, is I'm going to do 2 lefts there. So the entire passage. Once again. Next, we'll be discussing the mallet portion for the Senior High Audition Etudes Set 1. The one item that we have to discuss in this is with the 2 mallet portion beginning at measure 26, discussing the tied rolls. And the the slurred connected figures. The general rule is that if it's crescendoing, then obviously I'm going to speed up and the release of the roll will be the final dynamic or emphasized. If it's going to a place where there is no more continuous material, then we're going to try to decrescendo into the final note. I hope that will make this clear. Let me talk about this in relationship to the music. I'm going to do this very slow at 80 to discuss this concept, beginning at measure 26. Again, so I'm going to decrescendo the tied note because when I release on the B, I'm not moving anywhere yet, not until beat 4. In contrast, in the subsequent measure, this is measure 27, I'm going to speed up and crescendo beat 4 and release very strongly. So if it's moving somewhere to a moving, in this case, a moving 8th note line, I'm going to speed up the roll, and the release of the roll, the end note, the end of the tied note, or connected note, will be emphasized. If it's moving to a place that's stagnant, like beat 3 of measure 26, I'm going to decrescendo into that note from a tied roll. I hope this helps in your musical decisions. Now we'll be discussing Senior High Audition Etudes Set 1, standard part. The only discussion we're going to have is with rolls and ornaments within this passage. The first is I would use 16th note based rolls for all of your orchestral rolls. And in this etude, in this example, they're all notated in a traditional manner, which is 3 slashes or a 32nd note rhythm. Your open or your double stroke rolls are notated out as in measure 42, the 4th beat, where you have a 9-stroke roll leading to the downbeat of measure 43. So you understand the clarification of that. Again, from C until the tempo change, the metric modulation rather at 46, the opening rolls in measure 41 and the next roll in 43, I would use all 16th note bases. If the quarter note equals 180, I would primarily use 8th note triplets. So let me discuss this first with the ending. This is measure 58. So all of your roll motion in this will be 8th note triplets. So you're going to have an orchestral roll or multiple bounce roll at 59, the same at 63 and 64, and then you're going to have a very quick 7-stroke roll at measure 61, leading to the downbeat of 62. Now, one of the hardest tricks that I've put in this etude is measure 52, and this is going to require a motion change for your roll. So if you look at measure 52, you've got a crescendo over a 5/8 measure with a multiple bounce or orchestral roll. One of the things we want to try to do as the roll crescendos is that we've got to create more intensity. It's got to drive to that next downbeat. We've got a forte release with an accent, so it's got to drive. And what I do for the sticking is on the dotted quarter, I play 8th notes. So 1, 2, 3. And then for the second beat, or the last 2 8th notes, I do an 8th note triplet. So you have. I can really create some energy to get to that downbeat. There's a lot of information just in that one measure. So again, measure 52, the first 3 8th notes, the dotted quarter, I'm going to play 8th note hand motion, right, left, right. And the last 2 8th notes, or the quarter note as it's seen in the part, is where I'm really going to do the crescendo and do an 8th note triplet. This is the final etude as a series of Senior High Audition Etudes Set 1. This is for tambourine, and today I'm going to be using a Black Swamp silver tambourine. There are numerous other companies that you may choose to use. However, I would recommend that you use a very articulate tambourine, particularly for measure 71, to get out the 32nd note figures. Realize that silver is a very articulate jingle, and depending on how the companies have designed the jingle, but typically silver is going to be more articulate than, say, a bronze or a copper. First, we're going to talk about rolls in this etude. And the first is the decrescendo roll in measure 70. With your rolls, our set position is I tell everybody that we're reading a book, and that we're at a 45-degree angle. So we're always going to come back to this. You have the opening, so the articulation stops. For the rolls, it's going to be a vertical position. And we're going to use the natural tendencies of the instrument to keep resonating to help with this sustain. Additionally, as we have a decrescendo, please realize that tambourines are a directional instrument. You can hear as I move the tambourine down. It's going to give the illusion of a decrescendo and crescendo, even though I did not change the velocity of my stroke with my hand. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the tambourine for the accent on beat 3, rather. It's going to keep rotating, and then I'm going to release on my leg. The next technique is getting the 30-second notes on beats 3 and 4 and measure 71 to speak. As mentioned, I will release the roll in measure 70 on beat 3, and I will perform the next parts here on the edge. And then the 30-second note crescendos, I'm going to alternate between my hand and my kneecap. So now the trick in this is I'm using what would be natural sticking policies for 30-second note figures. So 1, 2, and 2, 3, and 3, and 4, 3, and the one hardest part about this, the one trick that you need to do is work on getting a consistent sound with the left hand. Notice that I'm not using my wrist. I'm going to have extraneous sound. So I'm using it primarily from my elbow. To work on that technique. In measure 72, going ahead, I'm going to use a finger roll or a thumb roll to articulate these. Now you can see I'm rolling, and then I release with the palm of my wrist in an effort to articulate the accents that are scored in the part. Lastly, in the final measure, it's going to be just like measure 70, beat 3. I'm going to accent the same way and come back to this set position.